in this case out of New York. Now, this is the criminal case. This is Alvin Bragg's case. And initially, we were supposed to get to sentencing, right? President Trump was found guilty. That's why they kept calling him, he's guilty of 34 felonies. And they were all the same, basically. They were, it was the business dealings. And then somehow they got it into federal law because of somehow that being benefiting his campaign. These were, again, putting forward, when you look at these kind of situations and whether or not the hush money, whatever they want to pay, was, again, something that was handled incorrectly by the DA's office, again, by who they used and utilized for evidence. So the sentencing, which has already been delayed once or twice already.
So last week, we were supposed to finally get the answer from the judge about how the immunity ruling from the Supreme Court would affect it. Because Alvin Bragg, many say, went too far, including in his closing arguments to the jury, was bringing up testimony that would be covered by the immunity because it was amongst White House officials after President Trump was in office. So that was supposed to come out last Tuesday. However, both parties, the defense and the prosecution, requested a stay of proceedings for 1 week so that they could brief the court on how they think the case should move forward in the light of the immunity and also in light of him being elected president. Sure. Today, they were having a hearing. The attorneys for both sides were in the courtroom, and many were expecting that we'd even hear potentially his decision on immunity today because this stay only lasted through today. Now, what we've seen is that on the court's docket, the November 26th sentencing, which is next Tuesday, has been listed as adjourned. So there's a lot of people wondering, okay, are we going to get some sort of decision out today? Adjourned is a curious term that's placed there. It doesn't say rescheduled. Now, if you look at the legal definition of adjourned, it can just mean postponed. Most of us think of court being adjourned being it's over, kind of the end. This court is adjourned. The lay people, non-attorneys over here. But when you look at this, it's a curious timing that they're having this hearing and the court updates it to adjourned for next Tuesday's sentencing hearing.
His attorneys are in there today for Alvin Bragg trying to tell Rashawn whether they think the case should move to sentencing or does it have to be tossed out. I mean, they may be able to say you could try and bring it again, but not use the evidence that you gathered. But that becomes very difficult because fruit's the poisonous tree, all of those issues. So, we've got delay. Do we think we'll hear anything from the judge today, Will?
That's what's unclear at this point. Many people
set himself a deadline for today on
this. He delayed the proceedings of the case, which one of the proceedings was releasing his opinion on the immunity. Right. So in theory, today's his own set deadline. I assume, and many people think we'll hear something, whether that's another delay, even as he's trying to figure out what he heard.
Because now he's hearing it in court today, so it's not something he would have had pre-written. If so, that would have been, why did you bring them to court to argue? Unless it's going to be just something quick from the bench, which is, you know what, guys, I listened to what you had to say, but Supreme Court.
Right.
That's that. And then you've got the next date, which is scheduled for November 26th, adjourned, because he doesn't have to bring it back if he decides.
And now there's the other angle of this where that's been adjourned. If there's nothing set, there are some legal analysts that are looking at it and saying, is he just going to keep it on pause for 4 years? Which I feel like there is other avenues potentially of interlocutory appeals maybe, or other sorts of things that may not be the appropriate term for that specific type of appeal, again, but it's a weird thing. Trying to hold that again, it
would be very bizarre. And again, just because they would try to utilize a statute of limitations stopgap measure because now you've got a president. But the interesting part is that while we have it clear that the federal prosecutors cannot bring these charges or criminal charges against the sitting president, the idea that we've argued before at the U.S. Supreme Court and haven't had to get to a final resolution of was should politically voted on DAs, local DAs from around the country be able to haul the president to court either while they are president of the United States. And I do think that answer would ultimately be no. It's easier on the federal side, and that's been known. But we ultimately didn't have to get there the last time under President Trump. It's unclear if we're going to have to get there in this case either. I do think, Will, I mean, I know the betting markets they're trying to seize, but if you're a European or someone overseas involved in one of those betting markets, you might say, I think that for the most part, these cases, the ones with criminal liability, are going nowhere. And the question is just how long it takes for them to finally say it's done. And those are going to be very upsetting days for the left, because you'll no longer be able to call President Trump a convicted felon anymore. They will actually toss all of that out, and he will, again, it will be a wrongful prosecution, which you'll be able to talk about Alvin Bragg, how he brought a horrendous case against President Trump that totally failed once it had to go through Supreme Court scrutiny.